Yo, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about something I feel like almost every grower has dealt with at some point, and that's overwatering your plants. And this can actually be a lot more confusing than people think, because one of the first things we normally look at when something's wrong with our plants is the leaves. You walk into your grow area and you see those leaves starting to droop down and immediately think, okay, these plants need some water. So you water them, then you come back a couple hours and they're still drooping. You could come back the next morning and maybe they look even worse, and now you're wondering what happened because you thought you were helping them. That's exactly what I want to talk about today, because droopy leaves don't automatically mean your plant needs more water. Sometimes it can actually be the opposite. So today I'm going to show you 5 signs I look for when trying to figure out if my plants are getting too much water, and how I decide when it's actually time to water again. And we're also going to talk about something else I've recently done with these plants, which is defoliation. I took off some of these bigger leaves and opened up the canopy because I wanted better airflow moving through these plants. I'm going to explain why I did that and how airflow, moisture, and water all work together. So let's get straight into it. Sign number 1. The first sign is probably the most obvious one, and it's probably the easiest one to misunderstand, and that's droopy leaves. When people see droopy leaves, one of the first things they think the plant must be thirsty. And sometimes it is, but that's why I don't think you should ever look at the leaves alone and make your decision from that. You got to think about what happened before those leaves started drooping. When was the last time you watered? How much did you give them? And does the container still feel heavy? Does the growing medium still have moisture in it? Those are questions I'm asking myself, because let's say I watered these plants yesterday. I know they got plenty of water. Then I come back the next day and one of them is drooping. If I pick that container up and it still feels really heavy, I'm probably not immediately pouring another bottle of water into it. I'm going to give it some time, watch what happens, because if the problem is already too much moisture around the roots, giving it even more isn't going to solve that. And this is where you can accidentally create a cycle. You see the drooping, you assume it's thirsty, you water, and it continues drooping. Then you think maybe I didn't give it enough, so you water again, and now the growing medium's staying wet even longer. That's why the biggest thing I've learned is don't react based on one sign. Look at the whole plant and think about what you've already done. And before we move on, I want to explain something, because I think the word overwatering makes people think it's only pouring a huge amount of water into the pot. That's not necessarily the whole story. A major issue is when the root zone stays too wet for too long. Your roots need water, obviously, but roots also need access to oxygen. So if the growing medium is constantly saturated and never really gets a chance to lose some of that moisture, you're changing the environment around those roots. This is where your entire setup matters. Your container size matters, the growing medium, the size of the plant, the temperature, humidity, airflow. All of these things can affect how quickly the container dries back. And that's why I don't believe in blindly copying someone else's watering schedule. I can tell you what works for me. Somebody else will tell you what works for them, but at the end of the day, you've still got to look at your plants and your environment. The second sign I look for is something anybody can check, and that is how heavy the container is. This has honestly become one of my favorite ways of deciding whether I should even think about watering. When I know the plant is ready for water, I'll pick up the container before I water. I'll feel how light it is, and then after watering, I'll pick it up again, and there's usually a noticeable difference. I know what this container feels like when it's getting dry, and I know what it feels like after I've watered. Then over the next few days, I can feel it getting a little lighter, and the more you do this, it becomes easier. You don't need a scale, you're just learning the difference. If I come back a few days after watering and pick that container up and it's still extremely heavy, that's telling me there's still a decent amount of moisture in there. So even if this would be normally around the same time I water, I might wait. And that's something I really want people to understand. A watering schedule should tell you when to check on your plants, not automatically when to water them. Sign number 3 is when you're noticing your growing medium seems like it's always wet. And one thing that can throw you off here is only looking at the surface. The top of the growing medium is exposed directly to air, so naturally that can start looking dry before everything underneath does. You might look down and think that looks dry, time to water, but there's still a chance moisture is still farther down. Then you pour more water on top, the surface dries again, you water again, and meanwhile the lower part of the container hasn't really got much of a chance to dry back. That's another reason I like combining the visual check with the container weight method. If the surface looks dry, I pick up the container. If it's still really heavy, I'm going to pay attention to the weight. And over time, you start learning what your particular setup does. Maybe one container dries a little faster, Maybe the one plant drinks a little more. That's completely normal. The goal isn't to force every plant to the exact same schedule. The goal is to learn what they're telling you. Number 4 is when a plant doesn't seem to be growing or responding the way you expect. Maybe the leaves don't look as lively, maybe the plant just looks sluggish, and the confusing thing is when something looks wrong, our natural reaction is usually to start adding things. Maybe it needs more water, maybe it needs more nutrients, maybe it needs to change in the light. Before you know it, you've changed 5 things in one day, and now you don't even know what the original problem was. That's why I've been learning to watch, slow down, and actually see how the plant responds. Sometimes doing more isn't the answer. If I've already watered, I know the container is holding moisture. I'm not going to keep pouring more into it because the plant didn't change within the hour. Plants need time to respond. If the root zone has been staying overly wet, giving that growing medium time can be more useful than constantly trying to correct something. And while we're still talking about moisture, there's something else I recently did that you can probably notice looking at these plants. I went through and did some defoliation. I removed some of the leaves from these plants. And I didn't do that because I completely wanted to strip them down. I actually still want a healthy amount of leaves on my plants. What I was looking at was how dense the canopy was getting. Some of the bigger leaves were overlapping each other. Some of them were covering areas inside the canopy, and some were in certain spots where everything was getting really packed together. So I went through and selectively took some of those leaves off. One of the main reasons I did that was for airflow. I want the air from my fans to be able to move around these plants and through the canopy instead of only getting the leaves sitting outside. Because think about what happens after watering. You've got moisture in your growing medium, you've got the plants transpiring, and you've got the leaves sitting close together. If you've got a really dense canopy without much airflow moving through it, you can end up with little pockets where humid hangs around. And that's something I'm trying to avoid. So by taking off some of those leaves, opening the plant up, I'm giving air more room to move around the branches and throughout the canopy. I'm not trying to make the plant look bare. That's not the goal. I'm trying to be able to look through here and actually see some space. I want to see the stems. I want air to have pathways through the canopy. And that's really the point of this whole video. Watering isn't something I look at by itself. I'm looking at the moisture in the growing medium, airflow, humidity, and how heavy the containers feel, and how the plants look themselves. So if you think it might be overwatering, don't panic and don't start changing everything. Give the plant some time, make sure you got good drainage, airflow, and pay attention to how quickly the container starts getting lighter again. If this video helped you out, make sure you like, subscribe, drop a comment down below on what you want next, and we are out.